coming to terms with who I was, who I want to be, and where and how I was going to get there was the big questions. I count myself as fortunate that now that I got my diagnosis of my autoimmune disease with my heart, sarcoidosis, because it stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
It made me go, actually, you are not invincible. You're not a robot.
Yeah.
Because if you chase perfection, you never hear, you never learn, and you miss everything. We are taught from a very young age, specifically men, to get to the top, you have to do more.
Mm.
And then you get to the top, but then it's just not enough. You need to do more. And we ignore this. And when you're so in that moment, you can't see out or in. So you need someone to guide you. And then the accountability aspect of it is where you have to get through it.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. There will come a day, if it hasn't already, where something will happen and it's going to throw you for a loop. The end of a relationship, a job loss, even retirement. These are events are referred to as what can be a negative life transition. And it's a transition that if we can see our way through it. But the trouble is that these events can not only hold us back, but also carry with us an emotional scar that prevents us from living at our highest and best. Well, it doesn't have to be the case. And today, my guest and I talk about how we can do just that, move towards living a more fulfilling life. And before we get into all that, I just want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform so you can stay updated on the latest content while helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I just want to say I'm truly grateful. Now, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
What kind of negative life transition have you faced? And how is that event still impacting your life today? For me, I go all the way back to high school and losing in the provincial basketball championship and placing second. I carried this with me for decades, not as something positive, but as a story that I was only good enough to be in second place and not first. And what a story to tell yourself. But what if I had someone like my guest today to help me reshape that story? How much different would my life be today? I suggest it would be massively different. So allow me to introduce my guest. James van der Walt is a registered nurse in the UK and has been doing that for over 20 years. He specializes in ICU nursing, organ donation, and transplantation nursing as well, blending his work through mentoring, higher education, and coaching before he moved to the US in January of 2020. Today, he's a life transition and resilience coach who has worked with men and women for over 30 years, helping them connect to who they truly want to be. Welcome to the show, James. How are things?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm great. You have such a great story, and I didn't want to give up too much of it. As you know, in our work here at the Awakened Man, we always talk about all of us being on a hero's quest, and you've been on quite one yourself. And so tell us a little about your journey, specifically how you overcame a specific challenge and how that you had faced and how that has paved the road to who you are today.
Yeah. Wow. Big question. It's so I became a nurse, fell into it, literally. It was by accident, it happened. I'm one of those weird people who walk into a hospital and thought to myself, quite like this place. Interesting stories here, interesting things that happen. Unlike other people who never want to go into a hospital. A friend of mine started nursing. She asked me to join her, and the rest is history. So quick correction, it's 20 something years that I've been nursing and that I've been coaching. So here's to the next 10, which I'm very excited about, because I now had to accept a health diagnosis after 20 years of nursing, which involves my heart and my lungs, which meant that I couldn't work as much as I used to. Nurses work very hard, long shifts. And that was my challenge, to come to a point where I knew what was going on with me, but finding my way through that to the other side, my big transition, and coming to terms with who I was, who I want to be, and where and how I was going to get there was the big questions. And that's involved speaking to counselors, involved getting a life coach, involved accepting my new story, and accepting my new lifestyle, which was a lot more conscious and slower paced.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in ICU, like let's just think about that for a moment. Just not only are the shifts long, but the amount of intensity, like it must have been every moment of every shift, just at a number 10 level, on a scale of 1 to 10 level of intensity in having the things you're having to deal with. And how did that work in that part of time in your life prepare you for your life transition?
I was faced with life and death every day.
Yeah.
And then as a nurse, as a healthcare professional, you get to a certain point where you help people, you coach people, the families, the patient, you advocate for them. But to keep your distance from that life and death every day, I did get to a certain point where I didn't recognize that I would die. I didn't recognize that my life was going to come to an end. My consciousness of having to look after myself stopped. And so I count myself as fortunate that now that I got my diagnosis of my autoimmune disease with my heart, sarcoidosis, because it stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
It made me go, actually, you are not invincible. You're not a robot. And you need to start focusing on what is important for you to, 1, get better, 2, move forward, 3, what are you doing to help other people? Because that's very essential to me as a nurse. Yeah. And when I had to make this transition between, I can't nurse anymore, what am I doing next? That was very core to me. I love helping people. I love caring for people. I love leading people. I still have to be in service.
Yes.
But I couldn't be in service to people as a nurse anymore. And that's where coaching came across. We went into lockdown. It was COVID. And I was in a support group for people with the same heart condition as me. And we were talking and supporting each other. And then one of them said, "Oh, are you a coach? Because, I need a coach." I went, "Oh, no, I'm not. What's that all about?" And so I started looking into it. And then I found a fantastic organization called Health and Life Coach, Health Coach Institute. That's the word I was looking for. And they were able to help me see that health and life is one. If your health is not in control, your life is not in control, and vice versa. And that was an amazing moment where I went, all my nursing, all my medical experience and knowledge, I can still use that because I can help, for example, a businessman who was newly diagnosed with dyslexia in his late 30s. Now, what do I do now? And I can literally go, well, actually, that's your superpower. Let's turn that into a superpower because you can now creatively see everything around you like nobody else can.
Yes.
I can help people who've got newly diagnosed illness, for example, diabetes. And I can go, well, this is what's happening to your body, but this is what we can do to get you emotionally through this new diagnosis. This is not the end of the world. This is not the end of life. This is just the beginning. You've got an extra, let's call it a superpower. Yeah. You've got this extra bit that now enables you not only to help yourself, but to hear other people, have that empathy for other people, understand people better. And therefore, it's made you a more conscious human being. It brought you into the moment. And that was my big turning point, is to get to that moment where I go, I have to start acknowledging what my body's telling me. I have to start acknowledging what my mind is telling me. And that was to be more present in the moment.
Just making notes here. Just love that stuff. Yeah, that's such a great, what a powerful way to start our discussion here today. And you made a few comments where you talked about you didn't recognize that I would die, and I made that note because how many of us still think that we're invincible? And we're recording this in the month of January. I'm not really sure when we're going to get it. We'll get it out but we're going to get this one out for sure at some point. And of course, we also go through that time of doing New Year's resolutions and all that stuff. And I'm not really a big fan of New Year's resolutions. I am a fan of committing into becoming something that's a little more sustainable and that. And this year, I said to my wife that I was going to focus on health, because it's one of the areas I have truly neglected in my life. And when I mean by health, I mean physical health and nutrition, the whole piece. Whereas I spend most of my life now, especially the last 30 years, really focused on the mental aspect of it. And I did think that I can do whatever. I can go play sports. I can, work all day in the backyard, shoveling, moving, a yard or two of rock and not think anything of it. But now body's not quite the same. And so I really like that you bring that to the forefront. And we talk about that, especially as men, because we tend to do that to ourselves, don't we? We think that we're invincible.
Yeah.
We don't pay attention to how we eat. We don't pay attention to taking care of ourselves until we have that negative life transition moment. About. And yours just happened to be a heart condition. And so the other thing I noticed there, I wrote down, is you also talked about, that you're not invincible and not a robot, and it made you become more in the moment and present. And so I just wanted to back up a little bit from that and wonder, because I'm just wondering, before you got to that point, there must have been some self-sabotaging behaviors that you had that was leading you up to that point. What were yours, and how did you overcome them? And were there some that were actually after you had the diagnosis that you still had to overcome?
Yeah. I think one of them was just nonstop work, being a workaholic, and truly believing that the more hours I put in, the better I'll be, the more I'll be able to do. Ignoring signs of exhaustion, ignoring signs of, health issues. But it's that whole true belief that nothing can stop me. The harder I go, the faster I go, the more I do. And that is a belief system that we are taught from a very young age, specifically men. To get to the top, you have to do more. And then you get to the top, but then it's just not enough. You need to do more. And we ignore the signs of relationships falling apart. We ignore the signs of health falling apart. We just keep on going. And, you mentioned before about the example that you used about coming second place in a sport. And that become the belief system that you believe that, you're okay being second. But then there's also the whole belief system of some people are taught you have to be first all the time. And then when you get chosen as a second or a third, you feel a failure. And you're constantly chasing that next big thing, never satisfied with the now, never satisfied with, actually, I'm third here. What does that mean? What can I do to enjoy this, to appreciate this, to learn from this? Maybe that is your first place. Maybe you have one.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was a big thing, is that workaholic thing, that whole perfectionism, chasing perfection, chasing the perfection. And so all of the health stuff happened, and I went through that. I got through on the other side. And that's when the real work started, for me to realize that actually my big three things that I had to change in my life was perfectionism, judgment, and expectations.
Wow.
Which, by the way, 3 years later, still working on. Those are not 3 things that disappear now that I'm a life coach. I've not perfected that at all. That's exactly what I'm working against, is to perfect that. Because if you chase perfection, you never hear, you never learn, and you miss everything, because you never achieve perfectionism.
No.
And then I had to get rid of judgment. Judgment of self. Big thing. Yeah, so you didn't make it again, James. Now your heart's giving in. Well, that's a failure, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then that opens up expectations.
Man, I'm just sitting here listening to this and then just going, James, like, man, you just stuck a sword in my heart here, because those are the three things that I struggle with all the time as well. And I think a lot of men do, don't we? Like perfectionism, judgment, and what was the third one? I can't even read my writing.
Expectations.
Yeah, expectations.
Yeah, so perfectionism, judgment, and expectations. You're expected to live up to a certain standard.
Yes.
Your relationships must be perfect. You need to go out and earn a certain amount of money. You need to set an example for everybody. You need to you need to, and we don't need to.
No.
Be a human. See who's around you. Feel. Experience. Learn.
Yeah.
And then you can grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I just finished reading the book of the month for February for us, and it's Masculine in Relationship by G.S. Youngblood.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks a lot in there about helping guys understand and get into the feeling. And hearing you talk today, like this conversation just really brings me into that, just how much we are driven by external validation.
Yes.
Right. That external piece. And you're striving for that perfection and and we live in a do more society, not a be more, but a do more. And they're so different, aren't they? Being more versus doing more. They're not even the same. They're not even close to being the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on.
Yeah.
You are taught from a very young age. We all are, to you hear older people say, when I was a child, I heard older people say, if only I could have that, I must chase that. And so you learn that there's a constant drive. And, I drive a car, and I stopped at the traffic lights the other day and I saw another car and I thought, oh, if only I had that car. And I pulled over and I said to myself, you drive a very nice car. What is this? Why is this never, I could be driving, I don't know, Lamborghini, top of the range Ferrari.
Yeah.
There'll always be that extra, another car, that extra thing that I'm not achieving, that I'm not getting to. That's exhausting.
Yes.
You're not feeling in that. You're not seeing in that. You're not learning from that. I know the car example is it's a big thing, isn't it? Cars are very important, but
well, it's one of the ways a lot of men measure themselves, right? And it's funny that you said that, because we were just before we got on the show, right? We was talking about just came back from vacation. We were in California. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and it's minus 20 something degrees Celsius. So we've had some snow here, right? And so I was brushing off my car this morning, and lo and behold, there on the hood of the car, it's probably a 2-inch circle rust spot starting to show, right? And I'm going, and I had the same thought as you, boy, I don't want to have a rusty car. For me, it wasn't I want that other car. For me, it was, okay, I got to get rid of this car because it's got a rust spot on it. Well, who cares?
Yeah.
Right. Why am I caring so much? If somebody is going to judge and make me and I allow myself to feel that I'm less than because I happen to have a rust spot on my car.
Yeah.
So what? But I think we do that to ourselves, which is why the work that you're doing, and I really like that you've positioned yourself as this life transition coach. And so before we get into what that is, we've already talked a little bit about being about life transition, but how do you describe what a life transition is when you start to work with people?
Great question. Everything's a transition. Every minute's a transition in life. And some of us cope very well with minute to minute. Some of us cope with hour to hour. And then there's moments where there's significant moments where you feel life is just too much. And you can't see your way out of it. You can't see your way through it. And you just need someone to help you, support you, guide you. And so I provide system, and I provide support, and I provide accountability through that process, because those are the three pillars that my business is built on, because I do strongly believe that nobody should be alone in a major life challenging event. So that's why the support is there. And when you're so in that moment, you can't see out or in. So you need someone to guide you. And then the accountability aspect of it is where you have to get through it.
Yeah.
And therefore, we work and I support, and you learn from it. And that's where the accountability part comes in, is to learn. Because every transition that you go through, or every challenge that you go through, living through it, learning from it, absorbing it, gives you the resilience, gives you the building blocks to get through the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, to have had all of those people in place, and it could be several people, it doesn't have to just be me or a coach, to have had all of those people through my transitions and through my challenges was life-changing, and I got through all of it, and now I look at the next challenge as a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And just to also make it clear that we go through so many challenges in our lives that somebody might actually be listening to this and think, well, actually, this is not a big enough challenge. That's not the point. The point is, whatever challenge you're experiencing, that is what you feel. That's what you're going through. You can't compare or attach your own value to what you're going through in that moment. If you need help, you need help.
Yeah.
And for me as a man going through my transition stuff with my health, that was hard to admit that I needed help. To admit that actually, as a nurse, as a healthcare professional, can't heal myself. That was tough.
Yeah.
But so freeing. Once I got to that point, it was like, this is what I need to do. I need to ask for help.
Man, you're just spot on today, James. And the note I just made, I wrote a few things down, but it's not how large or how small the challenge is. It's the importance of it for yourself, right? And how many times, I always say that, God or spirit or whatever it is, however you want to refer to that for yourself in your life, will either nudge you, kick you in the pants, or push you off the cliff. It's your choice. It's coming. If we're not willing to be awake and aware of that, we need to change some things in our life, and we can pay attention and in the work that you're doing and helping us become more conscious about what's going on in dealing with the transition when it's small, or we can wait for the big push and the big shove and have something more, much larger to deal with. And I think that's why it's so important that we get, for me, when I to get as many different perspectives and voices on this podcast to help men understand that, listen, if it doesn't resonate with with the work that we're doing, maybe it does for what James is saying. And that's the goal. But the idea is, or we all have our stuff that we got to deal with. And we have to start dealing with our stuff before the stuff takes over. And then we're just a crumbling mess. And it's not that work can't happen there. It's just the hill is just a little higher to climb.
Yeah.
And you got to change it. Now, listen, you made a major changeover, especially with the health issues and having to reimagine who you are and what the work you're going to do. What was it like to finally find your voice and then accept this new version of James?
Yeah, it's still a work in progress, which I'm loving and really enjoying. What was it like to? It was a very joyous moment when I first did my first podcast as to be interviewed. For me, it was a very big deal to actually go and sit and say, I'm going to have to admit to a lot of stuff. One, I'm working not to be perfect. What man in this world is not trying to be perfect? I have to be out there openly saying that I have no expectations and I'm getting rid of judgment on myself. And how do you do that? Trying to teach people how to be conscious. I had to learn how to be conscious. And then I thought, yay, I've got this. I know how to live a conscious life. Booked the first podcast, got on with it. 2 weeks later, I'm like, I need to be more conscious. And just that continuous work. And I think that's what it was, is that realization that the work hasn't stopped and the work continues. And the more you work, the deeper you go and the more stuff you discover. And I don't even want to use the word well-rounded because that implies perfection. I just want to, it's that fantastic hill where you get a moment to stop and look out and reflect and go, I got this far. I'm doing good. And I've got all these people I'm helping, which is amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it's like an expansion, right? Is what is opposed to being, and I like how you're consciously aware of the language that you're using, and that not necessarily being well-rounded but being expansive, because there's always room for growth in the work that we're doing. Since you started this work as a life transition coach, what have you learned most about yourself?
What have I learned most about myself? As a nurse, it was my job to help and heal but mostly come up with solutions. And I worked very hard to get the qualifications and certifications, and I worked with many, many people over my life. I mean, the organ donation stuff that I did, that was all about coaching people through intense grief.
Sure.
So the biggest thing I had to learn when I became a coach was that I am not here to fix. I am not here to come up with a solution. That is not my job anymore. I'm here to listen. I'm here to hear. I'm here to ask questions. Because every single person that I work with, or even every person I come across, friends, family, clients, it's all about hearing them.
Yeah.
What is their story? What are they trying to find out about themselves? What's the answer that they have? Because all my clients have the answer. It's just my job to ask the correct questions so that they can work through it themselves, so that they can get the answer. Because if you can come up with your own answer for your own problem, you'll be motivated to do it. You'll be behind it. You'll support it. Instead of some, wise ass coming around to telling people what to do. So that was my biggest lesson.
Yeah, right on. Excellent. So listen, we've been talking about life transition, right? But I wanted to just come at it with a little bit of a different perspective. What would you say is the difference between surviving the transition and actually living in it through the transition?
Yeah, thank you. That's surviving a transition is done. That one's finished. Where's the next? And not actually reflecting on it, not actually learning from it. And so living through a transition is actually being conscious, being in the moment. This is hard, acknowledging that it's tough, acknowledging that you're going through a difficult time, finding the help and support to get through it, taking time to reflect. What is the hardest? What's been the toughest? How did I cope with that? When did I deal with it in this way? Giving yourself time to ask open-ended questions. When, where, what, how, who, so that you can get through it to the other side, know what you went through, feel what you went through, reflect on what you went through, and then you have all the building blocks. That builds resilience, and then that resilience and that foundation enables you to cope with the next one even better.
Love that. Love that. So listen, now we've already talked about, and you answered about how this life, being a life transition coach has, and what you've learned about yourself. But now that you're doing this as a career, what are you learning now about people? Because you talked about coming from you're not the fixer anymore. So what are you learning about people?
What am I learning about people? That living a conscious life is tough. And we've been so conditioned to not notice anything anymore, that we just miss everything. I put it on my social media the other day. What are you missing from your life? I got no responses. The people don't know.
No.
A few days later, I went, what do you want for your life? Loads of answers. And then just very interesting, when you start talking to people about what they want and you dig into that, then they suddenly realize, but a lot of the stuff they want, they already have.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get it. It's there.
Yeah. I love those two questions. And I'm not surprised to hear that, because a lot of us aren't, because we don't live consciously. And I know we've been using this word and we've been inferring what conscious, to live consciously is. So maybe we should, give a bit more of a clear idea of what does living consciously actually mean?
Yeah. So living consciously means that you are in the moment, that you know what is going on around you, that you hear questions, you ask questions, and you breathe properly. You can actually remember how you got home. Very simple example, but a lot of us drive to work or drive home from work, and we don't remember what happened. And conscious living is about knowing how many traffic lights you went through, or, how did you stop? What did you observe? So one of the first things I do with my clients on the first session is the homework that I give them to go home with is to take time out, at least 5 minutes a day, where they choose, what example can I use? They choose a color. And say, for example, yellow. And for that 5 minutes when they're out and about, they have to see all the colors, all the yellow, and count it. It's a very simple task to become more conscious and learning to observe more. So it's about noticing your surroundings, focusing on one thing at a time instead of multitasking.
Yeah.
It is about gratefulness, gratitude, taking time to stop and think about, that was good today. Yeah. I'm happy about that. I'm grateful for that. Big one is to accept what is happening is happening. That's not a simple one. That's a big one.
Yes, for sure.
It's acceptance. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, it's just awesome. Just what a great conversation we're having today. Of everything that we've talked about, and maybe there's something we didn't get a chance to touch on just yet, what would be one takeaway you would want our listeners to remember with everything that we've chatted about?
Yeah. I would say, get yourself an accountability partner. That could be anybody. And make a decision about how can you enhance your life to have a better experience every day. And for me, a big one is having an accountability partner. Somebody who can just remind you, James, have you gone for that walk today? Have you gone for that walk this week? And vice versa with that person. But yeah, that's something I do to remind myself to have a conscious life and to be in the moment.
Yeah, love that. That's awesome. Hey, I just want to say thank you so much, James, for spending time with me today and sharing your insights and how we can discover that even though we may have a negative life transition, that we can work through it. And that when we live consciously, life goes so much better for us. Now, if someone wanted to get involved with your work or participate in any of your programs, what would be the best way for them to do that and reach you? I'm
on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. On my website, www.vanderwaltcoaching.com. Reach out to me. I'm celebrating my 1 year anniversary of my company. People can contact me. There's lots of fun stuff that I'm doing for all of February and for the rest of this year, because it's 1 year that I've been in business. So I'm excited to hear from people.
Right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure all of that information, that contact information is in the show notes. So when people want to reach out, they can get a hold of you. So I want to say once again, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure to speak with you. And I really liked our topic today about helping folks transition through life in their experiences.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great. And I love your work. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.